Let's find out more from Jonathan Portes, Professor of Economics and Public Policy at King's College London and a Senior Fellow at UK in a Changing Europe. Good evening to you, Jonathan.
Good evening.
Good to have you with us. It's not just UK hospitality that is suffering, is it? Many businesses will be affected by these strikes.
That's right. However, I think we should be a bit careful about exaggerating the economic damage done by temporary actions of this sort, for two reasons. First of all, and I don't underestimate the impact this has on individual workers, travelers, and businesses, but a lot of the money that is lost in spending now will simply be channeled into spending elsewhere. It's not a loss to the economy overall. People have money. If people have money, they're probably going to spend it. If they can't spend it in bars and restaurants, they'll probably spend it somewhere else. That's the first point. And the second point is this is only temporary. Economies tend to bounce back fairly quickly after incidents like that. Remember, when we had an enforced shutdown during the pandemic, not of a tiny percentage of the economy, which is all we're talking about here, but of huge sectors, a quarter of the whole economy, even then, actually, on the whole, activity did bounce back pretty quickly.
So, but if these strikes continue, Jonathan, as it does seem at least possible that they could, and Mick Lynch was talking about that, we just heard him saying that if there isn't a resolution to this dispute, and if you get this disruption to the railways, in addition to the other strikes, of course, which are affecting mail deliveries, road repairs, the health service, of course, and that has a knock-on effect. That does really add to the pressure on the economy, doesn't it?
I would say, as I say, I wouldn't understate this has impacts both on the strikers themselves, who of course lose income, and on workers and businesses, but it's actually, in terms of the macroeconomy, I'm afraid it is still relatively small. I would actually say that the current crisis in the NHS, which of course is not the result of strikes, but the result of the sustained pressure on the NHS for a number of years, the lack of appropriate staff and appropriate investment, that has a much larger and much more permanent macroeconomic effect. Even, of course, the fact that, we now think that 500 people a week are dying because of delays in A&E, roughly, the main impact of that, of course, is the human cost that imposes. But the wider economic effects of people who are out of the workforce because they can't be treated because their health are on waiting lists for treatment, or because people are having to look after sick or their elderly relatives, that is actually probably considerably more economically significant. So I would say that actually thinking about this solely as a direct economic impact of the strikes is actually less, probably in the wrong way of thinking about it. I would say we should be thinking about the overall dysfunctionality, as it were, of the economy, and in particular of the public sector, driven by frankly, by the mismanagement and underfunding of the last 10 years.
Okay, and let me just ask you, Jonathan.
Yes.
Sorry, we don't have a huge amount of time, but most economists seem to think we are heading into recession. Where are you on the scale of this? Do you think we are heading into a recession, and how serious do you think it's going to be in the coming year? Big question, but if you could give us a fairly brief answer, we'd appreciate it.
I don't underestimate the impact that will have on individuals, families, and businesses, but I actually think some of the gloom has probably been overdone. I would expect inflation to come down quite sharply over the course of the year, which will ease pressure on real incomes. I don't think interest rates will have to rise nearly as far as some people were predicting just a few months ago. They may not go higher than 4% or so. So I actually think that we will be, it won't be fun, but that we'll have a relatively short and shallow recession, and that we'll probably see things improving towards the end of the year. That doesn't mean that we won't have these sort of deep-seated long-term economic problems resulting from our relative economic decline over the last 10 years, the ongoing impacts of Brexit and so on. So we have some long-term problems. But in the short term, we shouldn't talk ourselves into being too gloomy.
Well,